Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Gaming with me, Tony Mo, and we're here today with another episode of Battlefield 1 Firearms Focus. Today we're going to be taking a look at the iconic Lewis gun. Invented by U.S. Army Colonel Isaac Newton in 1911, the Lewis gun would take many elements from the earlier designs of one Samuel McLean. Fun little fact that I discovered while doing research today. One of McLean's experimental weapons, the McLean machine gun experiment, was actually built here in my hometown of Buffalo, New York by the Automatic Arms Company. It featured a Lewis-type top-mounted 146-round drum mag, and only 3 samples are known to exist today, one of which was donated to the Springfield Armory back in 1970. The Lewis gun was originally designed by a U.S. Army colonel for U.S. Army use. However, an interesting set of political differences between Newton and William Crozier, who was the U.S. chief of the Ordnance Department at that time, meant the Lewis gun would be turned down by the U.S. Army initially and never, ever officially adopted. Throughout its existence, throughout the war, the U.S. Army would simply say no again and again and again, regardless of how successful the weapon actually was in other parts of the world. Always interesting to see just how far a difference of opinion can go. Frustrated, Lewis would resign from the army and head abroad. By 1913, he was living in Belgium, where he started the Armes Automatiques Company. He would begin commercial production of the Lewis gun, and the rest is history, so to speak. The Belgians, the British, the US Navy, and the Marine Corps would all eventually adopt the Lewis gun in one form or another. But it was with the Belgians, the very first military to actually adopt it, where it would get its nickname, the Belgian Rattlesnake. This was what the Germans called it after they first encountered it in battle. It was maneuverable, it was accurate, and they simply hadn't seen anything like it before. They feared it greatly. The Lewis gun was a true light machine gun, and while it was more expensive, it outclassed every other gun in service at that time, including the Vickers. It could be assembled faster, it was lighter, and it could be deployed not just on the ground, but in the air. A prototype version of the Lewis gun would actually be the very first machine gun ever fired from a plane. It would then become the mounted weapon of choice for British and French aircraft, and for the British, it would account for more takedowns of enemy aircraft than any other anti-aircraft gun at that time. They didn't just deploy it in plane-to-plane combat, they would shoot down low-flying planes with this thing. That's how good the Lewis gun was. It's crazy. Now, the Lewis gun featured 2 very distinct design elements outside of its self-contained drum magazine. Its aluminum barrel shroud, which was said to vent fresh air around the barrel to help cool it, and a clockwork spring, which allowed the user to adjust its rate of fire. Now, many believe the shroud didn't really cool the weapon, and in many cases it was removed and the weapon seemed to perform just as well without it, but it is without a doubt a part of the weapon's iconic visual design and appearance. I mean, when I think of the Lewis gun, anytime I've seen it in history, or anytime I've seen it in a film or anywhere, it's had that aluminum barrel shroud on it, unless it was on an airplane, in which case we almost always see it with the shroud completely removed, most likely to save weight and to lose some bulk. Now, eventually, the Lewis gun would be replaced. Time went on, and the BAR was eventually developed and released. But it did not matter. It had left its mark on history, and through some of its more insightful designs, like the clockwork spring and its self-contained drum mag, it would drive the development of other legendary weapons, like the German FG-42 and even the M60. This is really a story of triumph, in my opinion. Personal triumph and perseverance. Everything was going against Isaac Newton when it came to the Lewis gun. I mean, you're a U.S. Army colonel, and the U.S. Army, who you work for, who you've served, doesn't want to take your own weapon design. You've got one person, essentially, in the military with enough influence to say no, 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 even though everybody else around him was probably like, this thing looks incredible. We have nothing like this right now. This could be super good for us. You know, and then long term, hey, look, the Marine Corps is using it, the U.S. Navy's using it, the Belgian and the British are seeing great success with it on all fronts of the war. And he's just at his desk back there like, no. But did Isaac Newton ever give up? No. He moved abroad. He left the United States. He went to a completely different country. And he found a way to put his weapon that he had worked so hard on into service. Just absolutely outstanding. And there's no other way to put it. Absolutely outstanding. And the Lewis gun would actually be used outside of World War I. In some instances, it was actually deployed in the Second World War. A spectacular piece of design, no doubt about that. Let's talk in-game. What's it like in Battlefield 1? Well, it is one of the early game LMGs. In fact, it's the very first LMG that you'll have unlocked for the support class. It's powerful, it's accurate, it has incredible hipfire capabilities, and if you manage to grab yourself the suppressor variant, you're going to get an optic, a bipod, and an expanded 97-round drum magazine that will give you some additional firepower. It has a very distinct sound, and I think it's one of the best LMGs in the game to fire. There is something truly satisfying about pulling the trigger and just watching the weapon bounce on its bipod and just hearing that beautiful, beautiful, almost slightly muted sound. It's also wicked fun to watch the reload animation for it. I know that it's not fully realistic, but watching him slap on that drum magazine and then just punch it closed, there's something really, really satisfying about that. Should be mentioned that it's also one of the more quick to reload LMGs in the game, at least when it comes to having a large ammunition capacity. Now, it doesn't match the same sort of presence as a 200-round drum magazine on something like the MGNA, but nonetheless, it's a really, really great LMG for the support class. And early on, considering it's all that you have, you're going to be able to kick a lot of arse with it. I particularly enjoyed it as a weapon that is just really good at sort of room clearing in an odd way. You know, especially if you have the bipod, you can toss gas, you can put a gas mask on, and you can still have this immense hipfire capability. One that is really unmatched. There's no other LMG in Battlefield that I've used, as of yet anyways, that has that same sort of hipfire capability in close quarters. You know, you can throw gas, you can just unload on people with it, and even better, if you have the bipod, you can throw gas, go prone, and even without ADSing or looking down the sights, you still have a supported fire position, which just makes it super, super deadly. Undeniably, one of my favorite weapons in Battlefield 1 and one of my favorite weapons in history. There's just something about its look, its sound, its overall presence, and most importantly, the story behind it that makes it very, very special. Now, I want you guys to keep in mind with this series that I really do a condensed overview of the history of these weapons. Obviously, if I talked about everything, we'd be here all day long, and while that would be a lot of fun, it's not really the point. So I implore you guys to check out all of the resources that I'll post down in the description below. There'll be other videos, there'll be other channels, there'll be other sites, other resources that really look deep into the history of the Lewis gun and any of the other weapons that I cover throughout the course of this series. If you're interested in history, if you're interested in educating yourself further and learning more, that is the #1 place to go. Head on down there, click those links, and indulge yourself. Outside of that, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. By today's standards, it's obvious that this was a really well-designed rifle. It's compact, it reminds me of a carbine in a lot of ways. Specifically, a lot of the carbines that we would end up seeing predominantly used in World War II. It was easy to handle, and it's light. Pretty much everything that we aim for when designing modern infantry rifles. Unfortunately, Che Regate would ultimately not be adopted by the military. Now, there's a lot of different speculation on why this was.